Possible to describe how to write sex scenes without having illustrative examples. And I learned this a few years ago when I inadvertently started the late night Saturday sex scene readings at the Historical Novel Society conference. That was because I was put on a panel of 6 people talking about how to write sex scenes, and we were conferring ahead of time, and I said, well, you can't really explain how it works without, at least a few paragraphs of illustration. I said, if we all read an illustrative sex scene, there won't be any time left for discussion. So I said, why don't we ask if we could have an hour or so after the banquet the night before, and anyone who would like to stay for the sex scene reading can. We'll each read a scene, and then we can refer back to them when we talk about it the next day. Well, nobody remembers the panel, but everybody remembered the sex scene reading. And it has been reprised by popular demand for the last 4 years. I will say it's pretty illustrative, both of the good and the bad, because we don't play favorites. If you're brave enough to get up and read one of your sex scenes in front of 400 people, have at it. May the Lord be with you. It does attract some very exhibitionistic people, I'll say that. And then some of us are just, teachers. I used to be a university professor, so in fact I've been doing stand-up here for like 30 years, including that. Anyway, this actually started with this particular version of the workshop. Started with a Canadian women's magazine called Chatelaine, which wanted me to write a feature for Valentine's Day that was writerly and so forth, 750 words, and I said, okay, that's about an hour and a half's work. Yeah, sure, why not? So I wrote them a 750-word thing. I didn't want to do anything mushy, gooey, or romancy, etc. So I said, the quick start 5-minute guide to writing sex scenes, which I will read you and then we'll go on. This is for those in a hurry. About the writing, I mean. The second thing to note here is that it's impossible to talk about sex without having double entendres every other sentence, even if you're not trying. Where most beginning writers screw up, you should pardon the expression, is in thinking that sex scenes are about sex. They're not. A good sex scene is about the exchange of emotions, not bodily fluids. That being so, it can encompass any emotion whatever, from rage or desolation to exultation, tenderness, or surprise. Now, lust is not an emotion. This will come as news, I'm sure, to some people. It's a one-dimensional hormonal response. Ergo, while you can mention lust in a sex scene, describing it at any great length is like going on about the pattern of the wallpaper in the bedroom. Worth a quick glance, maybe, but essentially boring. So how do you show the exchange of emotions? Well, you've got dialogue, expression, or action. That's about the limit of your choices as a writer. And of these, dialogue is by far the most flexible and powerful tool that a writer has, which we will see in a number of illustrative examples. What people say reveals the essence of their characters. And here I gave just little snip examples because it was only 750 words. First example, I know once is enough to make it legal, but... He paused shyly. You want to do it again? Would you mind very much? I didn't laugh this time either, but I felt my ribs creak under the strain. No, I said gravely, I wouldn't mind. Now, do you see the 2 people there? Yeah, it's not just one person talking. As it sometimes is if you're making up sex scenes in your own head. Yeah, there really should be 2 people at least involved. Well, I mean, sometimes it's a threesome with you and the people on the edge. Now, you do, of course, want to make the scene vivid and 3-dimensional. You have an important advantage in dealing with sex, insofar as you can reasonably expect that most of your audience does know how it's done. Ergo, you can rely on this commonality of experience and don't need more than brief references to create a mental picture, which is one of the reasons why, in fact, when you write sex scenes, you don't need to go into a lot of physical detail. We don't need to have the fingers creeping over her silken skin and sending blazing tendrils of whatnot up and down her. There's a chunk in here about the object in question and what you call it. Or the objects, as the case may be. Anyway, you want to anchor the scene with physical details, but by and large it's better to use sensual details rather than overtly sexual ones. Just read any scene that involves a man licking a woman's nipples and you'll see what I mean. Either the writer goes into ghastly contortions to avoid using the word nipples. The phrase tender pink crests comes vividly to mind. Or else does it in blunt and hideous detail so that you can all but hear the slurping. This is distracting. Don't do that. So how do you make a scene vivid but not revoltingly so? There's a little trick called the rule of 3.